Hello. Today I'm going to be presenting on poverty and food insecurity. My name is Nicole Levi. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is what is food insecurity. So food insecurity is typically defined as a lack of variety and quality of food. So a lot of times people will lack fresh produce in their diet, meat, dairy. Their meals are often very carb heavy, so starches, bread, pasta. Often just the cheapest food you can get that are shelf stable, and they're often not nutritionally dense. A lot of people have to skip meals because they just can't afford food, or their meals are very small and they're never full and always hungry. A lot of those low price foods, like reliance on fast food because it is convenient and quick and typically more affordable, they might fill someone, but they are often very low in nutrients. So food deserts are often categorized as areas where access to affordable and nutritious food is very, very limited. An area that has easy access to food would be dubbed a food oasis. So the focus is on the access and the lack of variety and the lack of choice. So someone might have something in their area like a corner store, but there's a real lack of variety there. Or they might not have anything close to them, so they have a lack of access. They have to drive quite far to get somewhere. So extremely rural places, like some areas in Alaska or some reservations here, that might be quite far from the nearest grocery store, or if they are, if there is one, it might be extremely expensive to purchase things there because they have to be sent in. So as far as food deserts, they can vary if we're talking about urban or rural. A lot of people think of rural when we talk about food deserts because mileage-wise, for rural people, you would think they're more likely to be in a food desert. For example, here we have no car and no supermarket store within a mile, and you see this is primarily in the south, and then some areas over here between Arizona and New Mexico, but not really in these super rural areas, because a lot of people have cars and have some form of transportation. Because if you live somewhere very rural, you need to have transportation because there often isn't public transportation. So for rural, often mileage can be significant. Someone might have to drive really far to get to their nearest grocery store. And then as far as urban areas, the focus is more on a lack of transportation. So someone might have to walk or ride a bike, which isn't safe in a lot of areas. For example, Houston's not a very walkable or bikeable community. And a reliance on public transportation, you can't really carry many groceries if you're taking public transportation compared to if you have your own personal car. Another thing is, obviously, transportation can be expensive, and in areas like Houston, our public transportation is not very robust. So as far as poverty and food insecurity, they're very, very closely correlated. So the lower income a person is, often the higher rate of food insecurity they experience. We have a couple options here in the United States, like EBT and SNAP, but they're not perfect systems. And one of the ways that they fail to meet people's needs is that a lot of people might have that assistance and they can afford food. But there are other things about being poor other than not having food, like not being able to afford your bills, whether it's your light bill, your rent, your health care, your phone bill, where you're not getting any assistance, but you have enough food. So some people commit SNAP fraud, which is a felony, and that would be something like going to the grocery store and approaching a person and offering to buy their groceries in exchange for cash. So that instead of just having your card, you can have cash in your hand and use it for whatever you need. And unfortunately, SNAP fraud is punished very, very harshly, in some cases harsher than aggravated assault or child sexual abuse. And then I want to talk about the intersections of ethnicity, race, and food insecurity. So people of color, Hispanic, Black, Native American people experience food insecurity at much higher rates. People of color in America are also more likely to experience poverty. So over here we have this chart, and as you can see here, down at the very bottom is white people, and then Black people and Hispanic people are the orange line. So you can see they experience it at much higher rates. And like I mentioned before, it's not on this graph, but Native American communities also experience a high level of food insecurity. And then as far as how your neighborhood impacts food insecurity, as we're probably aware, many cities are segregated by race and class. We have low-income neighborhoods and primarily people of color neighborhoods. So this is a map of Harris County, and Houston is extremely segregated. So as you can see on the west side of town, this kind of greenish gray area, that is predominantly white, and then outside in the suburbs, outside of the city, is also predominantly white. And then on the east side of town and the south and north side, that is predominantly Hispanic and Black. So then if we look at the next one, this is a map of income distribution in Harris County. So again, the predominantly white areas are the more affluent areas, upper class people, and in the west side of town. And then on the east side and then south side and north side, that is predominantly low income people. So when we look at grocery options for these people, you can see that on the west side of town, which is more predominantly white, there are far more options. There's, I believe it's about 10 Krogers on the west side of town, and then one on the east side of town, and one here on the southeast. So that's with Kroger. Another grocery store that's predominant in Houston would be H-E-B, and it's the same issue. There's about 7 H-E-Bs on this side of town. These two are actually not that far apart at all. I used to live in this area, and both were about a mile away from me, about 5 to 7 minute drive. So you can see there's one on the east end of town, and then there is this one which borders the 3rd Ward, but it is on the edge of the 3rd Ward instead of being truly in the 3rd Ward. And I believe it was probably built there because there's also middle class and upper class people living in this area. There are a lot of nice apartments and the medical center is over here too. And then when we talk about things that are on the more affordable side here in Houston, we'll be talking about dollar stores. So Dollar General is one example. It is predominantly on the north side. There are literally none on the west side over here. And on the east side of town, there's a few. And Family Dollar is very concentrated in one area. And this is a predominantly Black and Hispanic area of town. Family Dollar or Dollar General or dollar stores do often carry food now. Some do have a small produce section or frozen and refrigerated sections, but usually there is not a lot of variety, and the quality of the food isn't great. They do have a lot of processed options on the shelf, like shelf-stable items that people can purchase, but if you live somewhere in this area, your closest options are probably going to be something like a Family Dollar, not an H-E-B or not a Kroger. And if you don't have reliable transportation to this part of town, which is pretty far, you have to rely on stuff like that. So why is this so important? Because of the effects on health, mental and physical health. On the physical health, people can really struggle with their weight when they have such limited options. Diabetes, heart problems, nutritional deficiencies when they're not having a variety of food and fresh food. They'll have deficiencies in vitamins and minerals that are really important. Children are often shielded from food insecurity by their parents to the best of the parents' ability, if it is possible. Parents will often bear the weight of being food insecure and make sure that their kids have enough food. Unfortunately, the research shows that those kids fare similar to kids who do experience food insecurity because of the stress that they see their parents experience. So this can have issues. This can mess with children's mental health. They can experience a lot of trauma from this, and it can affect their performance in school, and they might have behavioral issues. And then I wanted to really quickly touch on this, that COVID-19 and food insecurity COVID-19 has definitely exacerbated food insecurity, especially in early 2020 when a lot of people were getting laid off. We didn't know what was going to happen, really high rates of unemployment. That obviously impacted people and their access to food, and if they could afford food. And then also a lot of children rely on school lunches and school lunch programs, a lot of times having 1, maybe 2 meals at school. And when kids could not go to school in person, they often missed out on those school lunches. So one last thing I want to talk about is some solutions or things we can do to combat food insecurity is to improve and expand SNAP and EBT. I talked about it a little bit earlier. It has some shortcomings for sure, but a lot of people really need it, and a lot of people do benefit from SNAP or EBT. Another thing is universal basic income, which a lot of people do support, and that could help people with some of the shortcomings of SNAP, where people might not need money for food because they have SNAP or something, but they need money for their bills or health care, or a car payment, whatever. It's to give people money that they have the freedom to choose where to put. And then you can also support your local food banks. You can start a community fridge, or if you already have a community fridge in your area, donate to that community fridge or community pantry. You can donate and volunteer at food banks, donate your time and energy, or you can just donate food or donate money. It's really important to just get involved in your community. See what your community needs. Maybe you guys need transportation, or you need more grocery stores and fresh options in your area, or maybe not your community, but someone else's, and you can get involved in your community or get involved in local elections and vote for people who care about this kind of stuff and care about food insecurity and poverty, and make some change. And then lastly, here's my slide with references.